Hey guys, and welcome to Chapter 13 over Troubleshooting Hardware Problems. This week we have several objectives we're going to go over. Some of it may seem repetitive, and we'll also reintroduce some of the tools that we've spoken about previously. Now the first objective this week we're going to go over is to learn how to approach and solve a computer problem related to hardware, especially when that problem occurs during the boot process. Next objective is to learn how to troubleshoot problems within the electrical system. The next objective in the chapter is to learn how to troubleshoot problems that occur during post or power on self-tests before video becomes active. Next we will learn how to troubleshoot error messages that occur during the post test. The next objective in the chapter is to learn how to troubleshoot problems with the motherboard, the processor, and possibly even RAM. The next part of the chapter goes over to learn how to troubleshoot hard drive problems. We hate these, but they do happen. Following objective will be to learn how to troubleshoot problems with monitor and video, and yes, we will talk about CRT monitors. Unfortunately, they are still around, and we may have to troubleshoot them. Of course, the preferred method would be to get rid of that old CRT monitor. Sometimes that isn't a choice when it comes to finances. And lastly, in the chapter we will finish out talking about learning how to protect a computer and the environment. Let's go ahead and start looking at our first objective and covering our material for Chapter 13. Now when we go to take a look at how to approach a hardware problem, if at all possible, always begin troubleshooting a computer problem by interviewing the user or the customer. Find out when the problem started and what happened about the time that it started. What you need to do is get as much information from the customer as possible. And we've gone over some of this before, where you need to interview the customer. Include such questions as, can you describe the problem? When did it first start? And when does it occur when you're using the computer? Or was the computer recently moved? Perhaps something has been jarred loose, and now that's just the problem. Ask questions like, was any software recently configured or upgraded? This one seems to get us a lot of results is, did someone else use your computer recently? Sometimes people use other computers and then they will make changes that are best for them. Include questions such as, does the computer have a history of similar problems? Before you get started, obviously you always ask, is there any important data on the drive that is not backed up? One of the best questions to ask that I feel is, can you show me how to reproduce the problem? And I've mentioned this one before because it gets the customer or the user engaged, and it shows them that you care and that you want to see everything and let them kind of have control momentarily. Now after you gather that information, prioritize what to do and begin diagnosing and addressing the problem. We've talked about this before. One of the biggest problems is beginner technicians think they already know what the problem is rather than finding out all the information they can, and they just jump into the problem, and sometimes this can create more problems. Make sure when you're approaching a hardware problem that you use all the available troubleshooting resources to you, such as any user manuals that may be on hand that you have or that maybe the customer has, whether it's paper or preferably digital. Use the old interweb. Get on the internet and do searches for similar problems. If it's a code, or if it's you've got some symptoms, plug that in maybe on a manufacturer's website. And while you're on there, use their telephone or email technical support. Use those resources that the manufacturer is going to provide to you. Sometimes the manufacturer will also provide some diagnostic software. Go ahead and download and use that. If you know the customer's make and model before you get to the customer site, before you remote in, make sure to have that software available to you. Another resource we have that a lot of technicians are either scared to use or they just choose not to is use those other technical associates that are within your organization if you have them available. Your team, and make sure that you reach out to your team in case it's something that you're having difficulty with. Customer satisfaction, is one element of that is the speedy solutions to the resolution of their problems. So, try to make your customer happy by using all of your available resources. Now, as a technician, you need a game plan on how to solve PC problems. One of those type things you can add in your IT tool bag is a flowchart for troubleshooting. I'll show you one of those now. here's an example of a flowchart you can use for troubleshooting your problems. You can go through these and look at it yourself and, alright, does the PC boot to Windows without any errors? No. Well, then follow that pattern and then ask your next question. Take a good look at this and see how it can be effective for you. Maybe you can take this as a starter tool and modify it to your organization or to your preferred troubleshooting methods to maybe include some stuff that you think should be there, and if nothing else, modify it to the case itself on a case-by-case basis. So if you're building up that knowledge-based troubleshooting database, you can share that with other technicians, and as well as using it for training purposes later on. Okay, now let's take a look at troubleshooting electrical problems. Obviously, if there's smoke coming from a computer, that's a bad sign and that's a bad day for someone. So let's look at some of the ways for troubleshooting these issues as a result of an issue with an electrical system. Determine if the system is getting power. Listen for your spinning fans or drives, and look for any type of indicator lights on the computer that shows if it's getting power. If there's any type of activity on your hard drive, look at your hard drive light and see if there's any activity on that. I've troubleshot a lot of computers where you go and they say they're not having any power. It's simply because it's not plugged in. Believe it or not, it happens. If you have to get into something more in depth, you might get out your power supply tester and test the power supply to make sure you're getting power from the power supply unit to the computer. Or you might even have to go into the motherboard and troubleshoot further on, but hopefully you can find a very simple solution right away. It's always best to go for the simple things first. I've gone to troubleshoot some issues before, and this happens more frequently than you would imagine, where a circuit breaker is just tripped because there's too much on that circuit. So you go to the location, you see that you're not getting lights on the monitor or the PC. You look at the UPS or the power strip or whatever the customer is using. Hopefully they're not using power strip. Hopefully they're at minimum using a surge protector, but more preferably a UPS. And you see that there's no lights on that power supply unit there, whether it's the UPS or whatever. So you unplug that and you plug something else into the outlet, let's say just the monitor, or you have a phone charger with you or something to that effect, and you see you're not getting any power at the outlet. Now in theory that's where your troubleshooting should stop, but that's not the case. Sometimes just because a computer has power to it, technicians are expected to just be able to fix it all. So at this point, try to find the breaker or have maintenance or whoever's in charge of the facility, or if you're at a customer's location, find the breaker box and see if the breaker is tripped. Intermittent problems sometimes occur, with power, and this is a bad day because they come and go and are very difficult to solve and can be caused by either hardware or software. The power supply, the RAM, the processor, the hard drive, and overheating can cause these intermittent problems. I've mentioned it before, but as always, make sure you try to remove dust from a system so that you have that proper ventilation. If necessary, install extra fans to help keep that system from overheating. A lot of times computers sit on carpet or they're in an area where there's a lot of traffic and they build up a lot of dust on the internal network of the computer, and it's necessary to pull a lot of that out, wipe it out, blow it out, vacuum it out, whatever the case may be, but get it cleaned up so that overheating doesn't happen and cause that shutdown. And lastly, as I said, make sure you do the troubleshooting for the most simple solutions first. You may have a connection issue where you have a two-part power supply going to a laptop and it's not making a full connection in one of the two connections that need to be made. Maybe the outlet plug has not been plugged all the way in, or maybe the power connector going into the back of the computer is not making a full connection. So look for those simple things first. Remember, these electrical problems can occur before or after the boot. They can be consistent or intermittent. Just because someone says a PC is dead doesn't mean it necessarily is. It could just be an electrical issue. Now if you get to the PC and you smell any burnt parts, don't turn the system on. Find the burn up part and replace it. Make sure that you've disconnected all power to that computer prior to opening the case to troubleshoot, always. If it is an old computer, make sure to check for sources of EMI or electromagnetic interference. EMI does affect older computers, and you might get some of this EMI from such things as fluorescent lighting in like a shop, or a copier or a fan sitting near that computer. So if it is an older computer, make sure to see if possibly the issue is the electromagnetic interference or EMI. Now, as far as the electrical system goes and problems with overheating, I want to leave you with this, that I've seen this a lot where people have inserted cards or they've just gone inside and played around their computer and they've forgot to leave those plates back on there in the slots. So make sure that you do not leave any expansion slots or bays uncovered. Make sure you always put those protective plates back on. It is not going to help your airflow to leave that unlocked. Is all it's going to do if you leave that plate out is allow more dust and debris, or even small creatures, the ability to get in there and affect your computer system.